in your view, how is the relationship between work and learning evolving? I know from our previous conversation, you're not a big believer in the learn, work, retire model. What's the alternative in your view?
I think the world is changing, and in the past, words like graduation or doing your finals, they're all words which suggest you stop learning at a certain point and then you're ready for the working life. And what I see, I think even in the pandemic that become much more fluid is, I believe more in long life learning as a given, combined with long life working, family life, private life, interests, which should be more fluid.
Yeah.
And what do I mean with that is that, of course, at some point you take your education, you do your master's or your bachelor's, and you start to work. But I think we have to probably reskill and upskill ourselves in our lives 5 to 6 times, because working life is 40 years or something. And in those periods, the economy continues to change, the world changes. So we have to upskill and reskill ourselves. And the question is, you can do that during your work, but you can also take a sabbatical. And I think, my grandparents lived in the worked in the Dutch coal mines, and they graduated, or they stopped working. They went with pension when they were early 50. I think now in the Netherlands and most European countries, it's mid 60s. That goes up a little bit every year. So how do you ensure you stay fit, vital, and around that age? And I think so, combining sabbaticals, upskilling, reskilling, education, working, family life has to become more fluid, which also asks completely different of how you look at work.
Yeah.
Stepping up the career ladder, sometimes going maybe a little bit more flatter because you want to focus on your family and things, or learn a new profession and then go back again. And so I think we have to look completely different at careers and how that integrates with life and working.
Yeah, and if we think, things are changing so fast. There's an argument they've always changed so fast, but they seem to be changing even faster now. Obviously we talked about how the pandemic has really accelerated things, but even prior to the pandemic, if we think that, at Davos every year, they've been talking about the future of work. They've been talking about the impact of automation on society, on organizations and everything else. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about how that's impacting the banking industry in a minute. And then we see that some of the research that the likes of the World Economic Forum are publishing, saying, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but by 2025, something like 80 million jobs will be effectively automated, but they'll be replaced by 90 million new jobs. Yep. A bit like every other industrial revolution, potentially we'll have more workers than we had previously. However, it seems to be all about skills now, and I know that you're seeing, I think, a shift from jobs to skills, which I think talks nicely to your, what you were saying around lifelong learning being so important.
Yeah, for what you describe for me is learning agility. Huh? How do we have a mindset of learning agility? Where I fully agree. I think for me, skills are the basics. So it's we move back to skills. What can someone actually do? And from those skills, what new skill sets can you develop? And I think skills are measurable. They learnable. You probably need a couple of steps. I just said probably you have to reskill yourself 5-6 times during your whole career. So get a new set of skills. And for tech professions, that can be, a new coding language, but it can be other professions, and let me give an example. My sister in this pandemic, she was a hairdresser. So she worked in that, and those jobs, a lot of people lost their jobs because we couldn't go to the hairdressers, etc., etc. So she unfortunately, lost her job. But, what I'm very proud of, in 2 weeks, she found another job. And what happened is she says, what do I actually like about my job? What are the skills with which I'm good at? And that was not doing the hair. It was more talking with the customers, make them feel comfortable, the social aspect of the job. So now she works in home care and does exactly the same, taking care of people, making their life a little bit more easier, have that chat. helping them as well with a couple of things. So for me, that is a very simple example where there is a skill set, and how do you explorate that skill set to do a different job. So in old-fashioned HR systems, you go from one function to another, but the skill set is almost the same. And you can see that everywhere. We also see that in banking. And to build a little bit on that, in the beginning of the crisis, a lot of our branches were closed. So those people were sitting at home, and we will see another part of the business which is called KYC, Know Your Customer, where there was a lot of work, and then a lot of people said, well, I want to work, I want to develop myself further, and we looked how we could upskill and reskill those people who worked in the branches which were close to other jobs which they could relatively quickly move into, and where there was work which has a future. Those jobs will be there at least for a couple of years, and then of course they have to reskill again. And it happened voluntarily. It happened because people were eager to learn something new and help their colleagues. And that made us think within ING, so how can we make this bigger? How can we automate that and almost make this part of our DNA and how we look at talent, at skill bases, and at jobs.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice, and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.